imperative to protect employees working on or around material handling devices. Here we will show how to approach someone operating a powered industrial truck. The person that needs to interact with the pit operator calls out or signals that they need to approach. The pit driver then pulls their e-brake and shows their hands and feet being removed from the controls. This signifies it's safe to walk within the 4-foot zone. When operating crane equipment, the 4-foot rule also applies. This next section we will show how an operator stops another employee from entering his 4-foot zone. As the operator notices someone approaching, he signals them to stand back. Once the approaching employee is out of harm's way, he resumes operation. 40-pound lifting restriction is a very important component of our safety policy. It can prevent a multitude of injuries, not only muscle, skeletal disorders, but hand and finger injuries as well. Handling material over 40 pounds makes it difficult to control pieces when completing daily tasks. In the next video, we will take a look at how to ensure the material we interact with is within our lifting limitations. Lifting defined: using the human body to support the weight of an object. No employee is to knowingly lift an object more than 40 pounds manually. 2 employees are limited to 80 pounds when lifting an object. All lifting required for objects in excess of 80 pounds must be accomplished mechanically. Pushing and pulling has the same impact on the human body as lifting. An employee is limited to 40 pounds of force when pushing or pulling an object. 2 employees are limited to 80 pounds of force when pushing or pulling objects. Objects requiring more than 80 pounds of force must be moved mechanically. Back injuries are some of the most common and costly injuries in the workplace. An estimated 80% of Americans will suffer a back injury at some time in their life. Low back pain most commonly occurs in people aged 30 to 50 years old. Back injuries cause loss of work and cost billions of dollars per year. When attempting to lift a piece of material, be sure to check the weight first. Finding the weight can come from several different areas. If the piece is a remnant, look on the SL12 tag attached to the material. If you're about to lift a cut piece, you can look on the material label or calculate the weight of each cut piece by checking the work order. If none of these avenues are available, we can calculate the weight of a piece by using the theoretical weight calculator. Using this formula, length times width times gauge times 0.102 will give an approximate weight of the piece in question. In this next video, we are going to demonstrate safe lifting techniques regarding unloading and loading of our saws. The operator will exhibit the do's and don'ts of safe handling. We will explain the risks involved when hand stacking finished goods onto shipping pallets. While placing finished material on skids, operators are at the risk of injuring their hands and fingers by pinching or crushing. These processes are usually being completed very quickly in preparation for the next job. When employees are in a hurry, mistakes can and do happen. In the plate processing section, we'll be going over saw-specific lifts and movements regarding removing cut pieces from the saw, rocking motion technique, hand stacking techniques, loading material into saws, stacking material from the air tables. As shown, the operator safely removes the cut piece from the mouth of the saw by placing his hand on top of the material and sliding it back. He then rolls the material off the edge by placing one hand on the front side of the material and then tilting up, allowing him enough space between the material and the rollers to place his hand underneath the back side. This technique mitigates the risk of the operator encountering pinch points while removing the material from the table. Here we can see an example of how not to hand stack material. While placing material on the skid, the operator is setting down the plate too quickly and creates a pinch point between the material on the skid and the material in his hands. You will notice when the operator is setting the material down, he does not leave enough room between the plates to remove his fingers before final placement. Now we will explain the correct way to hand stack material. As the operator is placing the material on the skid, he moves in a smooth, even motion. While setting down the material, he provides himself with enough space to safely remove his fingers from underneath the material. Once the material is safely set down, he places his hands on the edge of the material. This allows him to square up the piece without creating a pinch point. We will now demonstrate unsafe hand placement while moving material into the mouth of the saw. As displayed in this section, the operator has his hands wrapped around the edges of the material, creating a pinch point between the material and the mouth of the saw. The proper method for moving material into the saw is shown next. The operator keeps his hands on top of the plate at all times. He moves the piece onto the cut deck and uses the air floats to assist in the transfer of material. When pushing the piece up to the squaring fence, he places his hands on the edge of the plate to eliminate potential pinch points. In the next portion, we will take a look at how to properly stack material from the air tables to a skid on the offload table. When moving pieces on the air table, once again, make sure hands are placed on top of the plate. At no time should your hands be placed underneath the material. Material from surface to surface section, we'll be looking at single person specific lifts and hand placement, while transferring material between skids, while transferring material between carts, and rearranging finished material. Here we see the transfer of material from a REM skid to a supermarket location. The QA ensures his hands are in a position to avoid all potential pinch points while maintaining proper posture. Again, we see the QA maintaining safe handling techniques while transferring material from one cart to another. At no time should hands be placed behind the material. Once finished work is transported to the packaging area, QAs may be required to reposition material for the final packaging. Similar pinch point hazards to stacking material at the saw exist. Hands need to be placed on top of the material when sliding pieces to the desired location, and the rocking motion should be used to transition from tier to tier. The QA now demonstrates the hazards associated with using improper hand placement and not utilizing the rocking motion when changing tiers. We will now look at utilizing assistive devices while preparing a remnant skid for consolidation and staging heavier pieces with a jib crane. This is an example of how to safely consolidate and rearrange material on a REM skid. As stated previously, moving material on skids with multiple pieces poses a danger to hands and fingers. As the operator is moving stacked material, he keeps his hands on top, and while squaring, his hands remain on the trailing edge of the plate. He rearranges the material to be able to consolidate the new piece on the existing remnant location. As you can see, while maneuvering pieces of metal on the remnant skid, the operator created a pinch point, resulting in the injury of his hand. In the next portion, we will take a look at how to maneuver material that is either too heavy or awkward to handle by hand. Before using any material handling equipment, you must be certified in-house by a trained and authorized employee. Here we can see an operator rearranging REMs to gain access to the desired piece. Once his path is cleared, he can now stage the material for production. You will notice, the operator doesn't allow any part of his body underneath the suspended load and is following the requirements for the crane's capacity. In the loading and unloading saw table section, we'll be looking at forklift and human interactions with material regarding loading material with a forklift and a two-person lift, unloading the saw onto a forklift, and uprighting material. Loading and unloading our saws often requires forklift and human interaction. As the forklift operator approaches the saw, he ensures the saw operator is outside of the 4-foot radius. He applies the e-brake and exits his forklift to help offload the piece. Section, the operators will demonstrate how to offload a rim onto the forks. The forklift operator approaches the saw, pulls the e-brake, takes his hands and feet off the controls to signal the operator it's safe to transfer the piece onto the forks. When uprighting material for the secondary process, material must not be taller than 3 times the gauge. Material must only be repositioned on a flat solid surface. Material over 80 pounds requires 2 people to move it into the vertical position. When transferring material from the offload table to a cart, first the operator removes the material stop and makes sure the cart is positioned correctly at the end of the table. With hands on top of the material, he moves the cut piece onto the cart. Once the material is on the cart, the operator places his hands on the material off the edge of the flat surface. He then uprights the piece, preparing it for the secondary process. At no time do his hands get placed underneath the material. We're now going to spend some time examining the proper ways to handle sheet and extrusion. We'll observe the operations of the monorail crane, but mainly focusing on hand placement and the methods for safely handling oversized and awkward lengths of material. In the next section, we'll be looking at sheet and extrusion handling regarding hand placement while loading the shear, packaging sheet safely, single-person and two-person lifts, safe sheet flipping techniques, loading oversized extrusion, and handling extrusion bundles. Loading sheet into the shear, make sure hands are placed on top of the material to eliminate any potential pinch points. Although sheet material isn't inherently heavy, the edges can be extremely sharp and can easily cause cuts and scrapes. When actuating the shear, be sure to keep hands away from any moving pieces like the clamps or shear blade. During the packaging of finished sheet material, be aware of pinch points between the sheet and required crate or skid. If cut pieces are too large to maneuver safely with one person, a 2-man lift can be used to ensure safe handling. As shown, the operator on the left communicates he is ready to start by giving a head nod. Once the second operator acknowledges and is also ready, he gives a nod, then the flipping motion is safe to begin. Flipping sheet can be very hazardous if both operators aren't synchronized. Proper communication and hand placement are key to a smooth, safe lift. The operator in this portion is handling 240-inch extrusion. Due to the obstacles in his area, it was necessary for him to gain assistance while handling this piece. As you can see, the operators are working well as a team, carrying the piece into the saw with a smooth, even motion.